That massive 9.0 quake in Japan, it was covering up a nightmare scenario that still has geologists reeling. The tragedy on March 11th, 2011 wasn't just Japan's deadliest catastrophe. It was a massive red flag from the Earth itself, one that researchers are only just starting to decode. Imagine the strongest temblor in Japanese history unleashing 100-foot waves, claiming over 18,000 lives, and sparking the Fukushima nuclear crisis. But all that carnage, just the tip of the iceberg. The real horror story was unfolding miles below the Pacific seabed. This is the part that has experts freaking out. The Tōhoku superquake didn't just snap one fault line, it kicked off a chain reaction that hasn't stopped. 13 years on, we know the shake was so intense it actually shoved Japan 8 feet closer to the US and tilted the planet's axis by 6.5 inches, permanently altering our day length. But the scariest find came from deep ocean drilling crews who discovered the quake woke up a beast that had been sleeping for millennia. Tectonic stress is now spreading through the ring of fire like a virus, loading up fault lines all the way from California down to Indonesia. So was Tōhoku a freak accident, or was it just the first domino falling in a sequence, music, that sets off super quakes all around the Pacific? To find out, we have to look back at the exact second Japan's shield broke. That 9.0 monster in Japan was masking a horrifying reality that still baffles the pros. What went down on March 11th, 2011 was more than a historic tragedy. It was a planetary warning shot we're barely comprehending now. Visualize the biggest earthquake Japan ever saw, whipping up 100-foot tsunamis that took 18,000 souls and triggered the Fukushima meltdown. Yet, that devastation was merely the visible scar. The true danger was lurking deep under the ocean floor. Here's why seismologists are rattled. That megaquake didn't just break a single rock formation. It started a geological domino effect that's still active. 13 years later, the sheer violence of it dragged the Japanese archipelago 8 feet toward North America and knocked Earth's axis 6.5 inches off center, messing with time itself. But deep-sea drills struck the real horror evidence that the quake unchained a force, music, that had been dormant for thousands of years. Now, pressure is migrating along the ring of fire like a contagion, zeroing in on fracture zones from the West Coast to Southeast Asia. Was 2011 a solo event or the start of a global chain reaction? At 2:46 p.m. on March 11th, the seismic sensors lit up in a heartbeat. The meteorological agency's computers picked up the initial P waves and started crunching the numbers. Robot voices blared in coastal villages, but the code designed for normal shakes couldn't comprehend the monster that was waking up. The first alert blew the call on both power and wave size, forecasting 10-foot surges, nothing compared to the liquid walls barreling toward land. For the millions on the Tōhoku shoreline, the gap between the alarm and impact was terrifyingly small. In some spots, folks had just 3 minutes between the siren's scream and the ocean's arrival. Logs from towns like Minamisanriku show the loudspeakers barely finished the robot warning before escape roads were already underwater. Some people heard the alert but simply couldn't outrun the water. Others heard nothing at all. Power grids snapped and towers crumbled, leaving dead zones, music, right when people needed help the most. The warning net hit a physical wall, too. Turns out, sirens can get drowned out by the deafening roar of the earth cracking open or blocked entirely by concrete. Post-disaster surveys in some areas revealed a chilling stat: less than 50% of locals ever heard a warning before the wave hit. For the elderly or anyone near the waterline, survival came down to a handful of seconds. Getting the wave height wrong was a death sentence. Music. Seawalls and safe zones were engineered for smaller, historical tsunamis. The government prediction music, sent out immediately after the quake, completely missed the massive chunk of seafloor that had just heaved upward. When they finally corrected the numbers, the grid was down and the most exposed towns were already gone. Japan has the best alert tech on the planet, but on March 11th, it wasn't enough. That 3-minute buffer meant to save lives just vanished. Investigators found the flaw wasn't the machines, it was the inability to predict a nightmare scenario, a blind spot that haunts scientists to this day. The northeast coast was armored in concrete, a decades-long engineering project trying to hold back the ocean. Most barriers were 33 feet tall, built to stop the biggest waves anyone could remember. On March 11th, 2011, those walls turned into monuments of arrogance. The first surges, already dwarfing predictions, spilled over them like they weren't even there. In Miyako, The surge topped 130 feet, devouring seawalls and entire city blocks in a flash. Surveyors later found reinforced concrete snapped like twigs, their steel skeletons twisted by pressure that defied all calculations. In places like Ofunado and Kamishi, breakwaters that took years to build were erased in seconds. The grid died just as fast. The ocean punched deep inland, swamping substations and frying the backup generators. At the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, the lights went out as station blackout that kicked off a cascading failure destined to become a global nightmare. Breaking news across the Tōhoku region: critical infrastructure is down, hospitals are in the dark without emergency power, water pumps are dead in the water, and communication grids have gone completely silent. It is total chaos in Sai. Cell service has collapsed, with towers either powerless or physically smashed to the ground. Survivors are left in the dark, desperate to reach loved ones or call for help for days on end. Look at the disaster map's huge dead zones where GPS and cell signals just vanished. Rescue teams are flying blind, and victims trapped under the rubble are cut off from the world. Even the best engineering couldn't hold the line. Rail systems and highways built to survive massive quakes just buckled as landslides hit and the solid earth turned into liquid soup. Bridges meant to roll with the tremors were twisted like pretzels or washed out to sea. Ports that were supposed to be safe havens filled with debris, breakwaters smashed, navigation systems totally fried. Even the Shinkansen, the legendary bullet train, was brought to its knees. 11 trains stranded in the middle of nowhere, with the entire network paralyzed for days. Despite all the prep work, nature just outclassed us. The sheer scale and velocity of this disaster proved that human design has serious limits. This wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a total technological meltdown caused by failing seawalls, crashing backup systems, and dying power grids. In the wake of the devastation, Japan's top engineers are scrambling. They are reviewing everything, not just concrete strength, but the arrogant assumption that we can predict and box in nature's fury. But that massive 9.0 megaquake was hiding a nightmare scenario that has experts absolutely reeling. Because what went down on March 11th, 2011, wasn't just the deadliest tragedy in the nation's history, it was a geological wake-up call. And scientists are just now wrapping their heads around the terrifying reality. Deep under the Pacific, the fault line east of Tōhoku snapped in a way nobody thought possible. Over a 500-kilometer stretch, the ocean floor tore open with a level of violence never seen before in Japan. We are talking real-time tracking here. Seafloor GPS acoustic tech caught the whole thing as it happened. Massive chunks of the tectonic plate shifted a staggering 50 meters in just minutes. It wasn't one clean break, it was a chain reaction, ripping through fault segments like dominoes falling in fast forward. The rupture tore north to south, then east to west, obliterating an area roughly the size of Massachusetts and Connecticut put together. The computer models are chilling. It started deep, but then the brake hit the gas, reaching speeds of 7 kilometers per second faster than almost any quake we have ever seen. The energy release was off the charts, completely overwhelming the mechanical barriers designed to keep this kind of power in check. Old models predicted small, staggered slips. Wrong. The data showed a seamless, catastrophic cascade with 3 major slip patches, S1, S2, and S3 each unleashing ungodly force. In some areas, the shallowest parts of the fault, right next to the trench, slipped the furthest. That flies in the face of decades of seismic theory. The seafloor was a mess of complex fractures. GPS data showed sudden, vertical jumps, confirming the biggest movements happened right offshore. That shallow slip, scientists thought soft sediment would dampen it. Instead, it triggered the most dramatic shifts of the entire event. This was the smoking gun for that towering tsunami. The ocean floor lurched up and out, displacing unimaginable amounts of water in a heartbeat. Independent geophysicists running the numbers had to throw out their playbooks. One modeler looked at the raw data and called it a kinematic shock, a rupture that basically broke all the rules. The fault didn't just fail, it completely redefined what we thought a subduction zone was capable of. Now the question haunting every researcher is simple. What triggered this catastrophic motion, and could it strike again somewhere else? The answers were waiting deep beneath the seabed, where the true mechanics of this nightmare were hiding. That 9.0 quake was just the cover for a terrifying truth. Because the events of March 11th, 2011 went beyond just being a record-breaking disaster, It was a warning shot from the planet that we are only starting to decode. Picture this: the strongest earthquake in Japanese history, triggering 30-meter tsunami waves, killing over 18,000 people and sparking the Fukushima nuclear crisis. But all that surface destruction, it was just the tip of the iceberg compared to the sinister mechanics grinding away on the Pacific Ocean floor. 1 year later, a squad of geologists and engineers hopped aboard the research vessel Chikyu to solve the mystery that stumped the world's smartest seismologists. How did the Tōhoku fault slip that far, that fast? Their target was nearly 7 kilometers down, right off the coast of Miyagi Prefecture. They were aiming for the heart of the beast, the rupture zone where the seafloor surged 50 meters in a single violent heave. Enter the Japan Trench Fast Drilling Project, or JFAST, their mission drill straight into the fault. They had to punch through unstable sediment and shattered rock to grab the first ever core samples from a megaquake crime scene. As the drill bit chewed through ancient clay and volcanic ash, every meter brought them closer to the flashpoint where two tectonic plates slammed past each other with godlike force. The breakthrough happened when they pulled up the core barrels. Inside, a thin layer of finely ground, grayish clay, less than 5 meters thick. Under the microscope, that clay spilled a secret that rewrote the textbooks overnight. Lab tests clocked the friction coefficient at 0.08. That is drastically lower than normal rock. Basically, that clay acted like high-grade grease, letting the Pacific plate slide under Japan with zero resistance. Instead of grinding to a halt, the fault zone slipped freely, launching that catastrophic tsunami. But the shocks kept coming. Temperature sensors down the borehole picked up a heat spike that floored the JFAST team. The fault had hit nearly 700 degrees Celsius during the slip hot enough to physically change the clay's makeup. That intense heat, generated in seconds by the friction of sliding plates, boiled the water trapped in the minerals. It created something called thermal pressurization, and the effect was absolutely explosive. Water pressure spiked violently, instantly reducing friction and turning that fault line into a deadly, slippery slide. Dr. Harold Tobin, the lead scientist, dropped a bombshell. This result was the smoking gun explaining why the Tōhoku quake shattered every prediction in the book. We are talking ultra-low friction clay mixed with intense heat. That lethal cocktail allowed the fault to slip 50 meters, double the maximum limit of most models. This forces us to completely rewrite the rulebook on tsunami risks worldwide. The JFAST core samples, pulled from the abyss, prove that monster quakes aren't just driven by tectonic stress. It is the hidden, volatile chemistry and physics of the fault itself calling the shots. Picture a battered fishing boat, ripped from its moorings in Kezanuma, drifting like a ghost ship across the Pacific for months on end. When it finally crashed onto Oregon's coast, it carried more than just debris. It was covered in alien barnacles and seaweed never before seen on American soil. Scientists tracked this vessel and thousands like it, part of a staggering 1.5 million tons of wreckage swept out to sea. Ocean currents scattered this debris field across the North Pacific, trapping some pieces in a swirling purgatory for years before they hit land. From California to British Columbia, locals started finding fragments of ruined lives, fishing gear, roofs, even entire massive docks washing ashore. But the real shocker, things were alive on that wreckage. Japanese sea life, from starfish to kelp, survived the impossible journey across the ocean. We are looking at over 280 non-native species hitching a ride, a biological invasion on a scale we have literally never seen before. Aggressive invaders like the Asian shore crab and wakame seaweed took root, threatening to completely wreck local ecosystems. And it wasn't just bugs and weeds. Tests found traces of radioactive isotopes, carried all the way from the poisoned waters of Fukushima. The Pacific Ocean offered no protection. The wind, the currents, and that relentless debris field bridged two continents in the wake of the disaster. For survivors on both coasts, the aftermath of March 11th, 2011, became a saga of shifted tides and dangerous, uninvited guests. Over 200,000 people are still stuck in limbo. 13 years later, their lives are frozen in prefab units and trapped in makeshift towns that were never meant to be permanent. Home vanished in a heartbeat, replaced by isolation, uncertainty, and the brutal grind of waiting for a future that refuses to show up. Health reports from the disaster zones reveal a skyrocketing crisis. Depression, anxiety, and severe post-traumatic stress are off the charts. Psychologists in the shelters describe a nightmare: kids jumping at loud noises, adults haunted by visions of black water, and families shattering under the pressure. The stats are chilling. Suicide rates in these areas surged more than 20% above the national average in the years following the quake. Doctors on the ground point to an epidemic of loneliness, especially hitting the elderly who lost their homes and their friends. The community safety net's gone. Severed by evacuation orders and neighborhoods scattered to the wind, the economic toll is staggering. We are talking over $235 billion in damage. That is more than Japan's entire annual defense budget. And analysts warn the real number, factoring in lost productivity and lifetime mental health care, is astronomically higher. The trauma of March 11th is seared into the landscape, the minds of the people, and the wallet of a nation desperate for stability. Japan's 9.0 megaquake was hiding a terrifying secret. March 11th, 2011 wasn't just a historic tragedy. It was a geological warning shot one scientists are only just starting to decode. Leaked logs from the Fukushima Daiichi plant tell a very different story than the official press conferences. While officials played it cool, engineers knew within hours that 3 reactor cores were melting down totally out of control. A whistleblower later testified about the chaos, containment pressures spiking while backup systems failed, one after another. Behind closed doors, bosses argued over venting radioactive steam or risking a total meltdown. Today, a 1,150-kilometer exclusion zone stands as a silent monument to those choices. 13 years later, radioactive water is still bleeding into the Pacific, hundreds of tons released every single day. Insider leaks and secret documents reveal a disturbing pattern of cover-ups. They withheld critical contamination data from everyone: locals, global agencies, leaving millions in the dark about the poison right in their backyard. That 9.0 quake exposed a horror that still has experts reeling. This wasn't just the deadliest disaster in Japanese history. It was a wake-up call from the Earth itself that we are scrambling to understand. Seismic data is flashing red. In the decades since Tōhoku, magnitude 6 quakes in the region have jumped nearly 300%. Fault lines we thought were dead are waking up, sending shockwaves rippling from Alaska all the way to Chile. This data terrified international risk analyst Dr. Yuko Kaneko, who warns the Pacific Ring of Fire is on high alert. The government predicts a 70% chance the Nankai Trough, just south of Tokyo, will unleash a megaquake in the next 30 years. Computer models are even suggesting these seabed shifts could alter ocean currents and mess with global climate patterns. The lesson for emergency planners is crystal clear. The danger unleashed by Tōhoku didn't stop at the Japanese border. Today, the seismic stress from that rupture is still marching across the Pacific, silently redrawing the map of destruction from California to Indonesia. Decontamination costs have exploded past $500 billion while radioactive water continues to be released. A shocking reminder that this toxic nightmare is absolutely nowhere near its end. As the Ring of Fire becomes a ticking time bomb, the terrifying reality is not if another megaquake will hit, but whether we will wake up to the danger before the ground beneath us splits open. Just how much are we willing to gamble by ignoring the warning signs?